It's important to understand the difference between security and compliance. Two very different terms. Sometimes they get mixed together and some organizations think they're the same, but in reality, they're two very different things.
From Tyler Technologies, this is the Tyler Tech Podcast, where we explore the trends, technologies, and people shaping the public sector. I'm your host, Josh Henderson. Thanks so much for joining us. In this episode, we're diving into a common cloud computing question in the public sector. What is GovCloud, and when is it actually necessary? And to help us unpack the differences between cloud environments and why compliance and not assumptions should guide decision-making, I'm joined by Russell Gainford, Chief Technology Officer here at Tyler, and Gerard Gallant, Senior Program Manager for Amazon Web Services. Together, we explore how public sector leaders can make informed, secure, and cost-effective cloud choices that align with their specific needs and responsibilities. Let's get right into the conversation with Russell and Gerard, which we recorded at our annual Tyler Connect conference this year in San Antonio. All right, Russell, Gerard, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. It's great to have you both here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, good to be here.
Great. Now, today we're diving into a topic that brings up a lot of questions across the public sector, this distinction between GovCloud and what is often termed commercial cloud, and more importantly, when one is actually needed over the other. I know there is some history here as AWS has grown over the years, Gerard, but I wanted to start by asking you to define these terms, GovCloud and what has been known as commercial cloud.
And maybe I'll just interject asking Gerard is, given that Tyler is 100% focused on public sector, I'll just bring up there is a shift. That terminology of commercial cloud is really not the go-forward focus within AWS. And what we're terming, and when we talk with our customers out in the field, is it's AWS standard cloud. There's history of why it was called that way. I'll let Gerard expand on that.
Yeah, there was certainly, back in the day when cloud computing started, there was a rush of big commercial entities that went to the cloud. Think the Netflixes of the day. Think, you name it, the big companies that started back in 2006 when we launched AWS. So there was a thought that, it was a commercial cloud. It was a cloud for commercial entities only. And that kind of evolved over time as we introduced our government regions, which I'll describe in just a second. That kind of evolved over time that it really wasn't just commercial entities. There was a lot of other entities that were using our, quote, standard regions, not our government regions, to meet their mission, to put their applications, their data, and their solutions in. And really the big change was when we introduced the government cloud. The government cloud has a name called government cloud, but in reality, a government cloud it's for sensitive, controlled, unclassified information is what a government cloud is. And it's really defined by the compliance programs that are in that cloud versus what is available in our standard regions. So you really, you choose based upon what you need from a compliance perspective versus a location. A government cloud is a separate, logically and physically partition, and it is serviced and controlled by U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. If you need that, and there are certain programs that you need that, then you have to be in government cloud. If you don't need that, there's no reason to be in government cloud, which we're going to talk through in more detail.
Yep, we'll get into it for sure. Thanks for outlining that, for making the distinction here at the beginning of the conversation. So to dig in a little bit further into the topic, from both your perspectives, what's driving all the confusion around GovCloud versus standard cloud? And why do you think this has become such a common point of misunderstanding?
Well, we see it all the time. And to be quite honest, I've been in this cloud world for a long time now, so many years. And if I took a step back from that and approached as one of our customers and a CIO or anything else, and you said, well, if someone asked me, where would you like to put this product that we've put together for you? And would you like to put it in the commercial cloud, or would you like to put it in the GovCloud? My immediate answer would be I want it in the GovCloud. Now, having gone through several years of really understanding that history and what the government cloud region is and the levels of high classification security that are required in there, those compliance requirements, which is usually a much smaller set of common workloads, my answer would be I want to be in the standard cloud.
I would say just the very name, to add to what Russell said, the very name GovCloud. GovCloud is a name of a region. In AWS terms, it's a name of a region, but there are education entities in there. There's financial services entities in there. There's a bunch of different entities that are not government organizations. So I think the name, we all named it a GovCloud, has led to some confusion. And we're trying to help people understand, choose the cloud based upon the programs that you have, the compliance programs you have to meet. If you're HIPAA, if you're IRS 1075, if you PCI compliance for payment card, or CGIS, or FedRAMP, choose the cloud that based upon the program you need, regardless of its name that has been, that we've called it.
Yeah. Now, Russell, I'm hoping you can talk a little bit on the differences that show up in public sector conversations surrounding these two terms. Are there particular areas where you're seeing things getting lost in translation from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it comes down to helping spread the knowledge. And I also just like to point out that this isn't just the history of AWS, this terminology thing, and that other hyperscaler cloud providers have these terms that also lead to the same sort of symptoms of different industries that maybe aren't public sector going in, and vice versa, where things are going in that maybe the compliance isn't required. So it's more about, why were these things created? It was for this very high level of compliance that was needed for the top tiers of public sector. And that leads people to name it by default GovCloud. And then you start, ending up in this situation in the mix here. So it starts with the education and understanding, but also not knowing that there's a downside to it. And that the downside needs to be managed with the trade-off. So of course, if you ask myself or anybody else as a leader, when you're doing something, I can give you this, and it's the most secure lockdown environment that does all these different things to provide this extra level of protection. I'm going to say, well, I'd like that, right? Now, what you have to balance is that really needed for your compliance requirement levels, and what are the costs and the downsides of doing that, so you can make an informed decision. And so I think that's where we're now really embarking on this education of understanding what really needs to be in there, what doesn't, and why does Tyler as an organization make the decision and distinction based on working with clients on which cloud we use at which point.
Yeah, now there's a common assumption that GovCloud is more secure, and Gerard, you mentioned a couple of the compliance standards earlier on, but what can you tell us about why that's not always the case?
It's important to understand the difference between security and compliance. Two very different terms. Sometimes they get mixed together, and some organizations think they're the same, but in reality, they're two very different things. Our government cloud and our standard cloud, our standard regions, achieve the same level of security. Same technology exists in those two regions in the US. In fact, it exists across the world. Technologies such as the AWS Nitro system, which is our virtualization infrastructure, all your encryption in transit, encryption at rest, they are the same. So the security, you can achieve the same level of security in our government regions and our standard regions. And that it's a misnomer to think, although people think, hey, I'm a government cloud, it must be more secure. That is not the case in our world. It is the same security. We go back to what is the compliance objectives you're trying to meet. It's a different definition than security. And are those compliance definitions met in a U.S. region? Important to note, U.S. region, because most compliance programs in the U.S. have a data residency requirement, so data must stay in the United States. Can they be met in the U.S. by one of the other regions that we have in our standard region, or in our government region? Security is the same, and you achieve that by implementing those controls, just like Tyler has done throughout its complete stack.
And maybe I'll ask as a follow-up, because I think this was a real education moment for me early on in our AWS journey. Really, maybe explain a little bit more about Nitro, the hypervisor, how pretty much whatever we use now, it is the default hypervisor, and it's changed over time, and really what kind of difference that makes from that security perspective.
That is a great question, because if you look at other hyperscalers as an example, one of the core differentiators for AWS is our lack of access to data. So we achieve no access to data using a virtualization infrastructure that we custom built and custom hardware. And that virtualization infrastructure called the Nitro system. What it does is it takes very sophisticated software that is very large, sometimes buggy, and we ripped it apart and we put the various layers of that software on our hardware chips. So think of a virtualization infrastructure that controls, virtualizes storage, virtualizes compute, virtualizes memory, right? You've got a pretty sophisticated piece of software. When you break that apart and you put that on hardware chips, a storage hardware chip, it's an ARM processor called a Nitro chip. When you put networking on one of those, all of a sudden you get repeatable 100% cryptographically proven processes. And your software stack that manages all that shrinks significantly. So your attack vectors go way down. And when you build it like we did, we built it such that no operator had any ability to interact with any data in any way, shape, or form. No log data, nothing. What that does, and that's available, by the way, in every region in the world, including our standard regions and our government regions, what that does is it elevates the security to put the security of the data in our customers' hands, not in the cloud provider's hands. Critical piece of information for, particularly in public safety, for evidence, as an example, for chain of custody, for evidence. You don't want ancillary parties having access to that data. And the Nitro system is an investment we made over a 5-year period, culminating in 2017, and we rolled it out across the world, most importantly in our US regions. So Tyler uses, anytime you use compute or services that rely on compute, that all runs on our Nitro system.
And to me, I wanted him to explain a little more, because that was the aha moment for me when we started to say, wow, everything's coming out now. It is based on Nitro. Everything we're spinning up is based on Nitro. And that provides that lockdown of data, no visibility for the staff. And so essentially you do have that, the security in the GovCloud and standard cloud are the same. And now you're looking at compliance requirements, right? Nitro enables that where others can't.
And I would say, just to go a little bit deeper on that, there are some compliance programs, CJIS being one, where operators having some level of access to that data require those operators to be fingerprint-based background checks. Anyone who's familiar with the CJIS world, that's a known requirement. When you remove your operators from data, like we did at AWS starting in 2017, you remove the requirement that those operators be federally background checked for CJIS purposes. And that's a huge thing, because what it means is now, not only do you increase your security by having no cloud provider having any access to that data, you also decrease administrative burdens on states to, continue to background check these people that they probably have never seen. They're a name on a sheet of paper. And our approach is very different, as you know, very different. It relies on technical controls to lock our people away from that data and allow our customers to have their full control over data in process, in transit, and at rest, which we think is a very, very secure way of cloud computing.
And it's great when we talk with our clients and maybe new prospects and leadership to even be able to retell the talking points of that AWS story, because it puts everyone at ease right away. There is no access to it. This is the approach AWS has taken. We are directly working with you, and you're subscribing to a software through us. And when it's not some three-party, interaction, and there's concerns of trying to background check these people. So for CJIS, it was like, oh, there's a deep breath, both for our client base as well as for us.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of the Tyler Tech Podcast.
You can't always prevent disruption, but you can prepare for it.
That's right. And in our latest ebook, we explore how government agencies are building resilience into their operations, from cloud-based systems and automation to tools that improve response and coordination.
You'll discover real-world examples, like how an emergency app helped residents in Louisiana stay informed, and how secure payment technology supports service continuity during a crisis.
It also walks through 6 practical steps to help you assess risks, modernize infrastructure, and strengthen your ability to adapt.
Download your free copy of Resilient by Design, How Technology Supports Government at the link in the show notes.
Because every government needs a roadmap to resilience, and it starts with the right technology. Now, let's get back to the Tyler Tech Podcast. And now to stick with the client base, Russell, with you for right now, I wanted to put a scenario your way. So what if, because we work with public sector clients, what if somebody just assumed that they needed GovCloud? How do you help clarify that standard cloud can often meet the same needs that a GovCloud would?
It's through education discussions like this, because it has changed over time. And now that we're at this point, it's about explaining why we make the decisions, because they're backed by logic and what the market's doing, what AWS is security. Security is not static. And so these enhancements are taking place. So it's not a one-time training. And if somebody sat down, for example, in CGIS, and 8 years ago, they sat down on AWS, it would have been talking a lot about GovCloud, right? And then security's advanced and these capabilities are now there, and we're using Nitro hypervisor technology. So it's about, it's a continuing education. The cloud is moving so rapidly, the innovation moving rapidly. So it's having the discussions, why we made the decisions. And when we have those discussions, most people are like, okay, now I understand the background. Now I understand why you made the decision. Now I understand it's really standard cloud and not commercial cloud. And there's tons of public sector entities running it. And then that helps make the decision. And some of them were going the other way of saying, hey, we are going to have to move something into GovCloud here because you want that FedRAMP high, or you want some additional compliance that's currently offered only in that region.
I would add, not only just continuing to educate on security, but being plugged into the compliance programs that evolve over time also. So Russell said 8 years ago, I would say 5 years ago, if we said you could run criminal justice workloads in standard region, I would have been laughed out of the room. But as compliance programs have evolved, in particular CGIS now being a moderate impact level data as part of the modernization of the policy, and as people have better understood the cloud and security in the cloud. 7 years ago when I started at AWS, we talked about encryption and eyes glazed over. Customers didn't understand encryption because on premise it's very difficult to do. It's expensive. It takes a lot of horsepower. In AWS in particular, people understand encryption now. They understand it's going to get me a greater level of security. It's going to protect me from ransomware. So with the overall knowledge level of cloud, and I will say the pandemic helped enforce what cloud could do for customers because people had no other choice at that point in time. So the knowledge, I think it's just a natural progression. Knowledge has increased over the last 5-6 years. And with that came more informed decisions of what was secure, how do you secure, how do you encrypt, and all of that, we're all kind of growing and learning together. And it is a continual education, like Russell said, to continually help people understand, pick the cloud that's best for your compliance programs.
Yeah, how quickly we forget COVID, 19
Yes.
and the pandemic and the days that, people had to turn things off and children had to go remote. And many of our clients in public sector had to work from home, and things changed. And that is very true. We take a very pragmatic, cautious and approach working with our clients, because that's what our clients do in public sector. They have a lot of responsibility that's entrusted on them, and they're very pragmatic about how they approach the new technology, making sure it's right for them, that it follows all the guidelines and everything that's needed. But that he brings up that pandemic ban. That was one of those things where when there's a crisis, decisions are made. And I think the ability of the public cloud to quickly ramp up and help people get remote, help students be able to study at home, those types of things is pretty remarkable and often not looked back on, and how quick that actually happened. It was incredible.
Absolutely. You look at some of the unemployment insurance systems that were failing miserably after, the pandemic was declared, and those systems came back online. Those call centers came back online because of the use of public cloud, because of the use of standard regions to bring those things on very quickly so that operators could actually answer phones.
Remarkable.
Yeah. So, knowing all of this that we've talked about here today, how do we help our teams and our public servants make smarter, more confident decisions when it comes to cloud environments or what they're choosing to be their cloud environments?
Well, from our side, we typically provide our solutions in the cloud that meets the compliance needs that are needed. If it requires a certain level of compliance, we are going to offer a solution there. And if it doesn't, then we're going to have a conversation on what it means for the type of data that's in that environment and the compliance that's required. So then it's about education partnership, right? We're partnering with our clients to take them to the cloud when they're ready. And when they're there, we're explaining exactly why we've made these strategic decisions in collaboration with AWS as we move forward. But it's also about educating about the downsides. And I'm not trying to say downsides of GovCloud. It does amazing for what it does. We have lots of workloads that are in GovCloud, but it does come with the more value of those compliance standards. It does come with a higher cost, a cost that eventually has some level that's passed on with customers. It also has less workloads on it than some of the standard clouds. And so you get a level of scale in there that's in there. And it's also with the compliance requirements, it does take longer for new innovations to come out in that cloud. They are delayed for, depending on the type of feature, for a certain period of time. So those are the downsides on it. So with the benefit of I'm in an area that can meet this very high level of compliance, there are downsides for it. And it's explaining why that is and why we think for those type of workloads we run in standard, that is the best decision for our clients because, as Gerard said, the security is exactly the same. It's just about reaching that compliance.
And I would add to that, customers now generally better understand, because there's so much more work done in the cloud, they understand what is it that they need to meet. What is the compliance program they need to meet? Is it CGS? Is it HIPAA? Is it IRS 1075? And I will say, with multiple hyperscalers out there, public cloud platforms, it is important to note that there are differences between those platforms. So if you are on Cloud A, you may not be able to meet CGS in a given cloud. With AWS, it's important to be very cloud specific, so you can choose the region that best suits your workload. And that does vary cloud to cloud. So that can lead to some confusion with customers. If Cloud A says, oh, you're going to have to do this in a government region, but Cloud B says, no, you don't need to do that. And so it's all about educating and knowing what lane you need to be in so that you make the best decision. And Russell and I have spent a lot of time talking through what is the best approach to help customers understand. It really comes down to what do you need? What do you need?
That's a great point. Gerard brought up about it's not the same with all the different hyperscalers, right? And so AWS has Nitro, they have the way that they've architected it, but it might be a different conversation if they're on another cloud. And not, we've heard our CEO say this, the success we've had with our collaboration with AWS, it's rooted in the foundation of compliance and security and then built up from innovation on that. So it's not just about educating, it's explaining that AWS is our cloud provider. And with that, this is how we approach the different types of clouds that are in there. And sometimes we do hear questions and we do answer on other clouds that clients may be using because we're about partnering for their whole cloud journey and not even just their Tyler products. But we have to center in on our approach here with AWS and why we make those decisions because it is different with some of the other hyperscalers.
That's great. So as we wrap this conversation up, we've covered a lot here today, obviously, but if there's one or two takeaways that you would want listeners to take with them from this conversation, what would that be?
I would say choose with your application partners the region in the United States, whether that's a government region or standard. Choose the one that meets your requirements. Don't assume that if something is named Gov, you need it. Understand what is it that you're trying to achieve. Go back to your business objectives. I am trying to achieve IRS 1075 compliance. I am trying to achieve HIPAA. Where can I do that for the same amount of services and the same, the same breadth of services? What is my best decision? And don't let from a customer, don't let someone tell you that a gov region is more secure. If I can get one thing out there, a gov region is as secure at the same level. Don't assume because it's labeled gov, it's better. Now, I will say, just to be clear, there are cases you will need gov. If you need FedRAMP High, as an example, in AWS terms, which very few state and local agencies would ever even think about. But if you're a federal entity and you need FedRAMP High, in AWS today, you have to be in gov. If you're an arms trafficker and you need an ITAR boundary, you have to be in gov. But for the most of our state and local workloads, whether that's in ERP, whether that's in public safety, whether that's in justice, whether that's in courts, corrections, I got a lot of them, right? Those types of workloads don't have compliance requirements that require a government region. That was a long answer to a short question, but don't assume gov gets you more security.
Everything Gerard said, and just to back up to what he said from the beginning, the security is the same in these regions. It comes down to compliance. So in your mind, as you're thinking about it, think about that for the compliance that I need, where is the best place for it to run? And if I don't have any, understand that there are trade-offs to run in the region that does support the highest level compliance because it's needed, because those compliance levels require it. So just and work with and partner with your representative at Tyler, because we want you to be fully briefed on this, so that you, when you're talking to your constituents and your councils and everything else, you understand the differences and where things are running and why those decisions are made, because they are very thoughtful decisions and they've evolved over time. But that separation of security and compliance is really important.
Well, thank you both for this conversation. I have no doubt that it'll be helpful for folks moving forward. And yeah, really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
As we heard today, choosing the right cloud environment isn't just about terminology. It's about understanding your compliance needs, weighing trade-offs, and making informed decisions rooted in both security and mission goals. Russell and Gerard shared valuable insights on the real differences between GovCloud and standard cloud, when each is necessary, and how ongoing education can help public sector leaders navigate cloud strategies with greater confidence. And if you'd like to explore more on this topic, check out the show notes for additional resources. And we'd love your feedback. Fill out the listener survey linked in the show notes, or reach out anytime at podcast@tylertech.com. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show so you never miss an episode. For Tyler Technologies, I'm Josh Henderson. Thanks for listening to the Tyler Tech Podcast.